Okay, let's dive in. We're tackling a figure today who is, well, incredibly important, often controversial, and really foundational. We're doing a deep dive into Édouard Manet.
That's right. A French modernist painter, born 1832, died quite young in 1883. And his work didn't just challenge the 19th century art world. I mean, it arguably blew it wide
Well,
open.
it's paving the way for, well, pretty much everything we think of as modern art.
He's this essential bridge figure, isn't he? He's standing right there on that fault line between academic realism, the old way, and then, boom, Impressionism bursts onto the scene.
So our mission today for you listening is to really unpack how he navigated that transition. Why are his paintings, especially those early controversial ones, seen as these critical watershed moments?
Yeah, what makes them mark the definitive start of modern art? It's a big claim.
And when we say watershed, we really mean scandal, don't we? Pure, unadulterated outrage. Manet almost seemed to court provocation.
He absolutely did. His whole identity as this modernist pioneer is completely tied up with the intense fury that followed his early masterpieces. We're talking the Luncheon on the Grass
Le déjeuner sur l'herbe.
and Olympia, premiering 1863, 1865. These weren't gentle suggestions for change.
No, these were like cultural bombs going off in the Paris Salon, instantly condemned by the establishment critics, the gatekeepers.
So just as instantly hailed by the younger progressive artists, they saw it immediately. This was something new, something revolutionary.
That audacity just made him notorious overnight. It really is fascinating when you trace his career arc, isn't it?
Yeah.
How does an artist who was so harshly judged, I mean, wasn't there that famous critique about his brushwork?
Oh yeah, the infamous floor mop comment, that it looked like his painting was done with a floor mop. Unbelievable hostility.
And yet the same artist comes to be universally seen as the father of modernism. It's quite the journey.
And he just kept working through it all. The condemnation didn't stop him. His productivity was actually immense. If you look at the numbers, we're talking about 430 oil paintings, nearly 90 pastels, over 400 works on paper.
Wow.
He worked with incredible speed, incredible persistence, and it's precisely that controversial output, that constant pushing, that opened the door for basically every major art movement that followed.
So who was this guy? This rebel in a frock coat, as some call him. He definitely wasn't the stereotypical starving artist in a garret.
Not at all. He came from serious money, serious status in Paris. A true bourgeois revolutionary, if you like.
Born January 23rd, 1832. Grew up in an ancestral mansion right in Paris. Affluent. Extremely well-connected family.
His father, Auguste Manet, was a high-ranking official in the Ministry of Justice, a respected judge, and he had very firm ideas about his son's future. Law. That was the expected path.
A safe, respectable career. And his mother, Eugénie Désirée Fournier, also quite connected.
Very much so. Her father was a diplomat, and interestingly, she was the goddaughter of the Swedish Crown Prince, Charles Bernadotte. So, not exactly humble origins.
So that's an almost crushing level of societal expectation, surely.
Immense pressure. But Manet just wasn't having it. He apparently showed little interest or aptitude for his studies at the College Rollin. He was, by all accounts, bored stiff by convention.
So the law was out. What did he try next?
Well, to sort of appease his father, he tried the Navy. He sailed on a training ship to Rio de Janeiro in 1848. But when he got back, he failed the entrance exam. Twice.
Was it failure, maybe? Convenient? A way out?
One wonders.
Yeah.
Whether it was strategic or genuine failure, it worked. His father finally, maybe reluctantly, gave in and agreed to let him pursue art.
Okay, so his formal training begins, 1850 to 1856. He studies under Thomas Couture, an academic painter. That seems like a contradiction right there.
It is. And that contradiction is absolutely key to understanding how Manet later subverted everything. Couture was actually considered somewhat progressive for his time.
How?
He encouraged his students to paint contemporary life, to look at the world around them, not just classical myths or history, which sounds great. But the relationship soured because Manet took that advice very literally, and he applied it to subjects that Couture found, well, disgusting. Unacceptable.
Like what sort of subjects?
Couture was apparently horrified by Manet's choices. He started painting lower-class figures, the disenfranchised, subjects considered degenerate at the time. Think of the absinthe drinker, painted around 1858-59.
Ah, right. So Manet soaking up all this classical technique.
Exactly. Learning the craft, the draftsmanship.
Only to point it directly at the gritty, unsanitized reality of modern city life and poverty. That must have caused friction.
Huge friction. Meanwhile, though, he was doing his homework as a serious student, traveling Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and crucially, spending hours in the Louvre copying the old masters.
Who specifically?
Figures like Diego Velázquez, the Spanish master. Titian. You also see the clear influence of Dutch painters like Frans Hals and definitely Goya.
And that deep dive into the classics, that intimate knowledge of the canon, is what allowed him to then break away.
Precisely. It gave him the foundation to build his own distinct style when he opened his own studio in 1856. He starts developing this technique that visibly moves away from the highly polished, almost invisible brushwork favored by the Salon.
How did it look different?
Much looser brush strokes, more visible paint, a simplification of details, and critically, the suppression of transitional tones.
Okay, what does suppression of transitional tones mean for someone looking at the painting?
It means he started getting rid of those subtle, gradual shifts in shading, the chiaroscuro, that creates the illusion of smooth, rounded, three-dimensional form. Think of how Renaissance masters modeled a face or a body.
Right, lots of layers, smooth blending.
Manet started ditching that. He began using larger blocks of often quite flat, opaque color placed right next to each other. It creates this visually startling flatness. Figures can look almost like cutouts sometimes, rather than fully rounded bodies in deep space.
And subject-wise.
He fully embraced the realism championed by Gustave Courbet, focusing strictly on contemporary everyday subjects. Beggars, singers, Romani people, folks in cafes, bullfights. He made a very conscious choice. After this point, he almost never paints religious, mythological, or historical scenes again. It's all about the now.
So his first real moment at the Salon, 1861, The Spanish Singer. That must have given people a taste of this new approach.
It did. It was accepted, which was a win. It was even admired by the influential critic Théophile Gautier and got a good spot on the wall.
So a success.
Yes, but a success that already hinted at trouble. While the establishment found it acceptable enough, the younger, more adventurous artists really noticed the technique. The sources say its style looked slightly slapdash compared to the super meticulous paintings all around it.
Slapdash meaning unfinished.
Kind of. Loose, immediate, painted in a strange new fashion. One contemporary observer apparently said it caused many painters' eyes to open and their jaws to drop.
Wow. So that mix of intrigue and maybe slight technical offense, the feeling that he was daring to submit something so direct.
Exactly. That's the seed of what he would soon amplify into full-blown, career-defining controversy.
And that initial intrigue just explodes, doesn't it, into what we're calling the three great provocations, works that really kick-started modern art. Let's take them chronologically, starting with 1862, Music in the Tuileries.
Right. This is one of his first major masterpieces, focusing purely on modern leisure, the Parisian bourgeoisie enjoying themselves outdoors. It's a crowd scene in the Jardin des Tuileries.
And it includes recognizable faces.
Yes. Portraits of people in Manet's own social circle. You can spot the poet Charles Baudelaire, the composer Jacques Offenbach. Manet even tucked a little self-portrait in there.
Now, for us today, a painting of people chilling in a park seems completely harmless. Why on earth was the reaction so vicious? The sources say the attention was substantial, but most of it negative.
It boiled down to execution and subject hierarchy. The audience back then was just conditioned to expect smooth, invisible brushwork, especially in paintings aspiring to high art. Manet's brushstrokes are thick, visible, almost blocky in places.
So it looked crude, unfinished.
Exactly. To them, it looked negligent, like a sketch blown up large. And then there was the subject itself. By painting his specific friends, intellectuals, dandies, modern city folk relaxing, rather than, say, Roman senators or Greek gods.
He was challenging what was considered important enough to paint.
Precisely. He was implicitly saying, my friends hanging out on a Tuesday are as valid a subject for serious art as any scene from the Bible or mythology. That was a radical statement in itself.
And the reaction wasn't just verbal critique, was it? People apparently threatened the painting itself.
That's the report, yes. That some visitors were so offended by the crudeness, they actually threatened to destroy the painting right there on the wall. It's a staggering reaction to visible paint and a modern scene.
But it put him on the map.
Oh, absolutely. It achieved that first major goal. Notoriety. Eugène Delacroix, the established master painter, was actually one of the few who defended it. The controversy made Manet a household name in Parisian art circles, even if it was for scandalous reasons.
And the notoriety just snowballed the very next year, 1863, with Luncheon on the Grass, Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe. This one wasn't even accepted by the official salon.
Correct. It was rejected. But 1863 was a year of massive rejections by the salon jury. There was such a public outcry from artists and their supporters that Emperor Napoleon III himself stepped in.
And created the Salon des Refusés, the Salon of the Rejected.
Exactly, a parallel exhibition specifically for the rejected works. And this, ironically, gave Manet the perfect high-profile stage for his revolution.
And the painting itself, the subject matter is just legendary for its shock value.
It really is. You've got two fully dressed, obviously contemporary, sophisticated men. They're lounging in a woodland setting. And next to them is a woman who is completely nude, stark naked, staring directly out at the viewer.
While another woman, partly dressed, bathes in the background. It's the sheer lack of justification that got people, right?
Absolutely. The salon regularly showed nude figures, tons of them, but they always had an excuse. They were Venus or a nymph or an allegory of truth or something. They were safely in the realm of myth or history.
But Manet's nude.
She was clearly a woman of their time, a modern Parisian, and her nudity wasn't explained away by mythology, it just was. It strongly suggested a contemporary picnic, maybe something illicit, interrupted. Her gaze is so direct, so unashamed.
And again, the style fueled the fire.
Oh, definitely. Critics were absolutely infuriated by the handling. They called it abbreviated, sketch-like. It lacked that traditional, smooth, illusionistic depth. They threw words like ugly, vulgar, and of course that was the painting that got the infamous floor mop critique.
But here's the brilliant twist, the intellectual punch. Manet wasn't just being provocative for its own sake. He was deliberately referencing and messing with the old masters.
Exactly. This is where his deep study comes in. He knew his art history inside out. The actual arrangement of the main figures, the two men and the nude woman, is taken almost directly from an engraving by Marcantonio Raimondi.
Which was based on a drawing by Raphael of the Judgment of Paris?
Correct. And there are also clear compositional echoes of Giorgione's or Titian's Pastoral Concert, another famous Renaissance painting with clothed men and nude women in a landscape.
So he's using the visual language they respected,
but applying it to a modern, confrontational, arguably vulgar scene. He's basically saying to the critics, you know this composition, I've just swapped out your goddesses for maybe a prostitute on her day off. It was incredibly clever and deeply subversive.
And it worked in terms of impact. Le Déjeuner and Whistler's Symphony in White, #1, became the defining works of the Salon des Refusés. It made that exhibition legendary.
Absolutely. One of the most famous exhibitions ever, really. We know the writer Émile Zola was profoundly affected by it. He even based the pivotal painting in his novel L'Oeuvre on Manet's work.
So Manet became utterly notorious, famous or infamous. But did it help him sell paintings?
Not really, no. He gained notoriety, but still struggled to sell his work. He was still largely living off his family inheritance at this point. The fame didn't immediately translate into financial success.
Which brings us to 1865, and the painting that perhaps caused the biggest scandal of all, Olympia.
If Luncheon was a shock, Olympia was an earthquake. Manet consciously decided to double down. He'd apparently accepted a kind of challenge to give the official salon a major nude painting they couldn't ignore.
And he delivered, again referencing a Renaissance masterpiece.
Yes, this time it's a direct, almost confrontational paraphrase of Titian's Venus of Urbino.
Yeah.
But also maybe Goya's nude Maggia. He takes that reclining female nude pose
and strips it of all idealization. This is no goddess of love.
Absolutely not. This is a frank, quite stark depiction of a self-assured contemporary Parisian prostitute. And the scandal it caused at the 1865 salon was so intense, they literally had to post guards near the painting.
Just stop people from damaging it.
Yes. There were real fears of vandalism from outraged viewers.
What was it about Olympia specifically that provoked such fury, beyond just the subject?
So many things. First, the realism. She's thin, pale, not the voluptuous, idealized nude of tradition. Her body type ran completely counter to the prevailing classical standards. She looks bony, angular.
And her gaze?
Utterly direct, unabashedly confrontational. She's propped up on her pillows, looking straight out at us, the viewers, who are implicitly cast in the role of her client. Her servant is bringing flowers, presumably from another admirer. The whole scene implies a transaction.
The details reinforce this too, don't they? The small items of clothing she is wearing.
Exactly. They're very specific and contemporary. The orchid in her hair, the bracelet, that black ribbon tied around her neck, the fancy mule slippers just falling off her feet. These aren't classical draperies. They're markers of a specific kind of 19th century femininity linked to courtesans and fashion. They accentuate her profession.
And the symbolism. The black cat instead of Titian's sleeping dog.
Right. Titian's little dog often symbolizes fidelity or domesticity. Manet replaces it with this alert, arch-backed black cat, a symbol often associated with witchcraft, independence, or overt sexuality and promiscuity. It adds to the unsettling modern vibe.
And the servant.
The inclusion of the fully dressed black servant was also provocative. Some contemporary theory suggested it played on racial stereotypes about hypersexuality, adding another layer of sexual tension and emphasizing the private, transactional nature of the scene.
And technically, how did he make her look so stark?
Again, it's that suppression of transitional tones pushed even further. He uses strong outlines and relatively flat areas of color. This creates a lack of traditional modeling and depth, making her look almost pasted onto the background.
Inspired by Japanese woodblock prints, perhaps.
Very likely. Those prints were becoming fashionable in Paris, and their flatness, bold outlines, and unusual compositions definitely influenced Manet and the Impressionists. It made Olympia feel less like a window onto a realistic scene and more like, well, a painting. A constructed image, more disturbingly present and human.
The critics hated it, obviously. They attacked her dirty hands, her shamelessly flexed left hand covering herself.
They saw that gesture not as modesty, but as a vulgar, knowing wink. A mockery of classical poses. But the emerging avant-garde artists, Courbet, Cézanne, Monet, later Gauguin, they saw its power.
They championed it.
Yes, they recognized its honesty, its modernity. Olympia forced uncomfortable conversations about prostitution, about class, about the roles and representation of women in modern France. It was a truly pivotal work.
Okay, so with these massive scandals, Manet cemented his reputation as the great provocateur, the revolutionary. But he then really leaned into becoming the visual chronicler of everyday modern Parisian life. He truly became the painter as flaneur.
Absolutely. That term flaneur, the detached but passionate observer, the stroller who wanders through the city streets, soaking it all in it, was being defined by writers like Baudelaire, who was Manet's friend. And Manet gave that literary idea its definitive visual form.
He wasn't just painting scenes of the city, he was painting the experience of being in the modern city. Observing, sketching.
Yes, with almost a sociologist's eye for detail, but an artist's hand. Capturing those fleeting moments of interaction or non-interaction in cafes, bars, parks, train stations, he elevated this kind of urban observation into a subject worthy of high art.
And his cafe scenes are just perfect examples of this, aren't they? They feel so immediate and not staged at all. Places like the Brasserie Reichshofen, which inspired paintings like at the cafe or the cafe concert.
They're like painted snapshots. You see people drinking beer, maybe listening to music, flirting, reading newspapers, or sometimes just looking bored, waiting. He uses that loose, quick style, referencing painters like Hals and Velázquez to capture the atmosphere.
And the social mix?
That's key, too. You often see the urban working class right alongside the well-dressed bourgeoisie. They occupy the same space, breathe the same air, even if they don't interact.
Like in the cafe concert, you have that sophisticated gentleman in his top hat looking maybe a bit world-weary, and then right nearby, the waitress standing quite resolutely, maybe taking a quick sip of her own drink. The class lines are visible, but the space is shared.
Exactly. Or think of a portrait like Le Bon Bach from 1873. It's just this incredibly present, cheerful, bearded man, pipe in hand, glass of beer in front of him, looking straight out at you. It feels so warm, so immediate. He uses those dark, Velázquez-like tones, but the subject is completely contemporary and relatable.
But he wasn't only painting bohemian cafes and bars. He also documented the more formal activities of the upper classes.
Oh, yes. He moved across the social spectrum. Think of Masked Ball at the Opera. It's this swirling, vibrant crowd scene. Men in formal black top hats and coats, women in masks, colorful costumes, and again, he includes portraits of his actual friends within the crowd.
Making it both a genre scene and a kind of social document.
Right, or look at the races at Longchamp. It's all about capturing motion and energy. He uses this really unusual dramatic perspective. The horses are thundering almost directly towards the viewer. You feel that furious energy, as the sources put it.
Even his paintings of big public events seem to capture a cross-section of the city. Paris was changing so rapidly then, with Baron Haussmann's massive urban renewal projects.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look at his view of the international exhibition. It's like a slice of Parisian life spread out before you. You see soldiers relaxing, prosperous-looking couples chatting, a gardener at work, a boy with a dog. It represents a whole sample of classes and ages, all mingling in this newly designed modern public space.
Manet also took on current events, particularly war, using them to kind of update the grand old genre of history painting.
Yes, he moved history painting firmly into the present day. His first major example was the Battle of the Kearsarge and the Alabama in 1864. It depicts a naval skirmish from the American Civil War that actually happened off the coast of France. Manet might have even witnessed it, or at least the aftermath.
So no Roman legions or Greek heroes. Instead, it's immediate contemporary naval warfare. Smoke, ships, the sea.
Exactly. But perhaps his most politically charged work in this vein was the execution of Emperor Maximilian. He actually painted 3 large versions of this between 1867 and 1869.
Maximilian, the Austrian archduke who Napoleon III had installed as Emperor of Mexico, and who was then captured and executed by Mexican forces.
Right. Manet's depiction is this stark, brutal firing squad scene. It's a direct, powerful indictment of state-sanctioned violence, a formalized slaughter. And it clearly looks back to Goya's paintings of the Napoleonic Wars, especially the 3rd of May, 1808.
And it was seen as a critique of French foreign policy.
Absolutely. Napoleon III's Mexican adventure was a disaster and deeply unpopular in France. Manet's painting was seen as commenting on that failure, on the human cost of imperial ambition. It anticipates later anti-war masterpieces like Picasso's Guernica.
And the authorities knew it was dangerous.
Oh, yes. The subject was so politically sensitive that neither the finished paintings nor a lithograph Manet made of the scene were allowed to be exhibited publicly in France during the Second Empire. That tells you how potent contemporary history painting could be.
Manet himself lived through intense historical upheaval too, didn't he? The Franco-Prussian War and the Paris Commune.
He did. He actually served in the National Guard during the Siege of Paris in 1870-71. It was a brutal experience. Later, during the brief, bloody Paris Commune uprising in 1871, some of his artist friends apparently added his name to the list of the Commune's Fédération des Artistes.
But he wasn't actively involved.
No, Manet seems to have consciously kept his distance from the Commune's extremism and violence. He admired the moderate Republican leader, Léon Gambetta, but viewed the communards leading the uprising as dangerous radicals. Party hacks, as one source puts it.
But the violence of that period still found its way into his work.
Yes, most notably in a watercolor and gouache called The Barricade. It depicts the summary execution of communards by the Versailles government troops after the commune was crushed. It's a shocking image, and he directly reused the firing squad composition from his earlier Maximilian lithograph. It's this raw, journalistic depiction of contemporary brutality. And perhaps nothing blends his focus on modernity, urban structure, and challenging composition quite like his 1873 painting, The Railway, also known sometimes as the Gare Saint-Lazare.
Ah, yes. This one is fascinatingly, deliberately awkward, isn't it? It features Victorine Meurent, the model from Olympia and Luncheon,
His notorious muse.
sitting on a low wall in front of these imposing black iron railings of the Gare Saint-Lazare train station. But the train itself is barely visible.
That's the radical part. Compositionally, Manet just throws traditional perspective out the window. He ignores the convention of creating deep, receding space. Instead, you have this strong, vertical, and horizontal grid of the iron fence stretched right across the middle ground of the canvas. It acts like a barrier.
It flattens the whole picture, and behind it, just a big puff of white steam where the train should be.
Exactly. The only real evidence of the railway, the symbol of modern industrial progress, is that cloud of steam. And a little girl standing with her back to us, peering through the railings at it.
So if he's the painter of modern life, why hide the main event, the technological marvel? Critics at the time were baffled, weren't they?
Completely baffled. When it was shown at the 1874 Salon, they found the subject confusing, the composition incoherent, the execution too sketchy. They wanted a clear depiction of the train, the power, the progress.
But Manet gives them something else entirely. It's more about the feeling of modern urban space.
I think so. It's not about celebrating the train itself. It's about the new environment the railway creates. The iron architecture, the steam, the noise, even though you can't hear it, the sense of compressed space, maybe even alienation. That fence is like a visual metaphor for the barriers and structures of modern life.
And placing Victorine Meurent there, the face of his earlier scandals, but now fully clothed, holding a book and a puppy, looking directly at us.
It anchors the scene in his own controversial history, but also presents her as part of this new, somewhat ambiguous urban landscape. She's looking out, the child is looking in. There's a sense of disconnect, of observing and being observed, which is very characteristic of the Flanneur's perspective.
So the critics just didn't get his new visual language.
Not at all. They were still judging by the old rules of clear narratives and deep perspective. Manet was showing them the fragmented, ambiguous reality of modern life through a radically new, flattened, more subjective lens. But today, we see it as this incredibly insightful symbol of modernity.
So while Manet's building this public persona as the defiant painter of modern Paris, his personal life gets really tangled up with the art world, especially with the Impressionists, even though he never quite joined their club officially.
Right, he was always sort of their reluctant hero. But first, there's some significant personal intrigue, particularly around his marriage. In 1863, shortly after his rather imposing father died, Manet married Suzanne Leenhoff.
She was a Dutch piano teacher a couple of years older than him, and they'd been involved for quite a while.
Yes, romantically involved for about 10 years before the marriage. But the backstory is complicated. Suzanne was originally hired by Manet's father, Auguste, to give piano lessons to Edouard and his brothers.
And there's speculation, isn't there, that she might have actually been Auguste Manet's mistress.
There is persistent speculation about that, yes. Adding to the complexity, Suzanne had a son, Leon Coelho Leenhoff, born out of wedlock in 1852.
And the big question mark is, who was Leon's father? Was it Auguste the father or Edouard the son?
Exactly. That question seems to have remained ambiguous, perhaps deliberately so, throughout their lives. Leon was acknowledged and lived with them, and Manet painted him frequently think of boy carrying a sword. But the secrecy surrounding his paternity points to a complex, perhaps difficult, private reality.
It's fascinating, isn't it? This acceptance of ambiguity and maybe hidden truths in his private life seems to run parallel to his art paintings that often have these layered, hidden, sometimes provocative meanings beneath a seemingly straightforward surface.
Absolutely. He seems to have lived with a certain duality, which perhaps informed the duality in his work. And this personal complexity existed alongside the incredibly important artistic friendships he was forming.
He became central to that circle of artists who would become the Impressionists.
Yes, he formed really crucial bonds with figures like Edgar Degas, Claude Monet, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, Alfred Sisley, Paul Cézanne, Camille Pissarro. They became known as the Batignolles group, named after the area in Paris where Manet lived and where they often met in cafés, like the Café Gerbois, to talk, argue, and shape the future of painting.
And he had powerful allies in the literary world, too.
Definitely. Writers like Émile Zola became fierce champions, defending him against the critics. Stéphane Mallarmé, the symbolist poet, was a close friend. Manet even created lithographs to illustrate Mallarmé's French translation of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. And of course, Charles Baudelaire, the poet of modern life, was an early supporter and friend. These connections gave his art intellectual weight.
One particularly important and perhaps personally charged relationship was with Berthe Morisot.
Ah yes, Berthe Morisot, a brilliant painter in her own right, a core member of the Impressionist group. Manet met her in 1868, they became close friends and colleagues, and she later married his younger brother, Eugene, in 1874, making her Manet's sister-in-law.
And she influenced his painting style.
Significantly. She's often credited with pushing Manet to try plein air painting outdoors, directly from nature, which was central to the Impressionist approach. Manet, in turn, influenced her. He adopted some of her lighter palette and looser brushwork into his paintings in the 1870s. It was a real artistic exchange.
But there's also speculation about their personal relationship. Manet painted her many times.
He did. Some incredibly striking and intense portraits. Because of the intensity of these portraits and their close bond, biographers often speculate about a potential repressed love between them, a deep connection that couldn't be fully expressed, especially after she married his brother. Whether true or not, there's certainly a unique psychological charge in his paintings of her.
So, despite these close ties, why is he called the reluctant impressionist? Why didn't he just join their group exhibitions?
It came down to strategy and ambition, really. Manet, despite being their inspiration in many ways, held on to a more traditional belief. He felt that true success, true revolution, meant conquering the official Paris salon from within. He wanted to force the establishment to accept his modern vision.
Whereas the core impressionists like Monet, Renoir, Degas, Pissarro decided to bypass the salon entirely and hold their own independent exhibitions starting in 1874.
Exactly. Manet disagreed with that strategy. He thought they were marginalizing themselves. He wanted the official recognition, the medals, the state purchases that came with salon success.
Although when he was rejected, he wasn't afraid to go his own way, like in 1867.
Right. When he was excluded from the big international exhibition that year, he did rebel, but in his own style. He funded and set up his own massive, independent pavilion right near the official exhibition to showcase his work. It cost him a fortune, apparently so much of his inheritance, that his mother was seriously worried about his finances.
But that independent show, even though financially draining, was important for connecting with other artists.
Yes, it was actually where he made his first significant contacts with several of the artists who become the core Impressionist group, including Degas. So, ironically, his act of solo rebellion helped forge the group he refused to formally join.
So he was influenced by them, especially Monet and Morisot, using lighter colors later on.
Yes, his palette definitely brightened in the 1870s under their influence.
But he always kept something distinct, that use of black.
That's crucial. The Impressionists largely banished black from their palettes, believing shadows should be composed of colors. Manet always retained his powerful, dramatic use of black for outlines, for deep shadows, for those sharp contrasts. It gave his work a graphic strength, a solidity that set it apart. He might paint outdoors sometimes, but he always returned to what he called the serious work of the studio.
And his technical legacy for them, beyond just inspiration, the alla prima method is key here, isn't it?
Absolutely fundamental. This is perhaps his single most important technical contribution that changed painting forever.
Okay, let's break that down. Alla prima meaning at first attempt. How did it actually work, and why was it such a big deal?
So, traditional academic painting, the kind taught by couture and practiced for centuries, involved building up a painting in many thin layers, usually over a dark preparatory ground or underpainting. You'd apply a layer, let it dry completely, which could take days or weeks, then apply another translucent glaze, and so on.
Which creates that smooth, polished finish, that illusion of depth and internal light.
Exactly. It's a slow, painstaking process. Manet largely rejected this. He adopted the alla prima approach, which meant applying opaque paint directly onto a light-colored ground, often white or cream, and trying to get the final effect in a single session while the paint was still wet.
Wet-on-wet painting.
Precisely. Finishing it at the first attempt. This meant sacrificing some of that deep layered illusionism, but what he gained was incredible speed, spontaneity, and freshness. The brushstrokes remain visible, the paint surface itself feels more active, more material.
So when critics complained his work looked sketchy or unfinished,
they were partly reacting to the visible evidence of this rapid, direct technique. They were used to paintings where the artist's labor was concealed. Manet made the act of painting visible, immediate.
He basically weaponized speed, linking the technique to the fleeting moments of modern life he wanted to capture.
Beautifully put. It forced the viewer to confront the painting as paint on canvas, not just an illusion. It was revolutionary. And this alla prima method was immediately adopted by the Impressionists. It perfectly suited their goal of capturing fleeting effects of light and atmosphere outdoors, and it essentially became the standard technique for oil painting for generations to come.
Manet's incredible run of groundbreaking work really spans from the early 1860s right up until his death in 1883. But tragically, in his mid-40s, his health started to fail quite seriously. A really poignant contrast between his public artistic triumphs and his private physical suffering.
It is. By the late 1870s, he began experiencing severe pain and increasing difficulty walking, a partial paralysis in his legs. He went for hydrotherapy treatments in 1879, apparently believing or perhaps hoping it was just a circulatory issue.
But the diagnosis was much worse.
Yes, the reality was he was suffering from locomotor ataxia. We now know this is a devastating neurological condition, a common and severe tertiary stage of syphilis.
Syphilis was rampant in 19th century Paris, wasn't it? Affecting many artists and writers.
Tragically, yes. And for Manet, it led to this progressive, painful decline. Yet even while dealing with this debilitating illness, often needing assistance to walk or being confined to a wheelchair, he produced one last, absolutely major masterpiece.
A bar at the Folies Bergère, completed in 1882, exhibited at the Salon that same year.
It's an astonishing final statement, a summation of so many of his themes: modern Parisian nightlife, ambiguous social interactions, the complex relationship between reality and representation.
Describe the scene for us.
It depicts a barmaid, Suzanne, standing behind a marble-topped bar. She looks directly out at us, the viewer, with a rather melancholic, detached expression. Behind her is a huge mirror reflecting the entire bustling scene of the Folies Bergère Café concert hall, crowds, gaslights, acrobats' legs dangling in the upper corner.
But the reflection is tricky, isn't it? It doesn't quite add up spatially.
Not at all. That's the genius and the deliberate puzzle. If you look closely, the reflection of the barmaid in the mirror seems shifted significantly to the right. And in the reflection, she appears to be talking quite closely to a male customer in a top hat, a customer whose actual figure isn't in the real space of the painting.
So where is he supposed to be? Standing where we, the viewers, are?
That's the most common interpretation. We, the viewers, become the client she's reflected talking to. It implicates us directly in the scene, in the transaction. But the perspective is deliberately warped. Impossible. Manet uses the mirror not for realistic depth, but to flatten the space, create ambiguity, and confuse the relationship between the observer and the observed.
It's like his final brilliant assault on traditional perspective and illusionism, highlighting the artificiality of the painting itself and maybe the alienation of modern urban life.
Exactly. It encapsulates that feeling of being in a crowd but alone, the surface glitter and the underlying melancholy. It's a deeply complex and haunting final masterpiece.
And after completing this huge, complex work, his illness really forced him to scale back.
Yes. The physical effort of large canvases became too much. In his last year or two, he limited himself almost entirely to smaller formats, particularly still lifes.
Flowers, fruit, vegetables.
Yes, beautiful, intimate paintings like a bunch of asparagus or the lemon. There's a real poignancy to this final chapter. This revolutionary artist, known for his shocking public statements, turns inward to these quiet, contemplative subjects.
Painted with that same directness, that alla prima freshness.
Absolutely. They might be small, but they have an incredible vibrancy and presence. His very last works were a series of about 20 small still lifes depicting flowers, often single stems, in simple glass vases. The last one was painted just about 2 months before he died.
There's that quote attributed to him, isn't there? That an artist can say everything with flowers, fruit, and clouds.
Yes. It suggests a kind of late-life realization, perhaps, that the power of his revolutionary technique wasn't dependent on shocking subjects. He could find profound meaning and express his artistic vision even in the simplest, most universal forms. There's a sense of resolution there.
Did he receive any official recognition towards the end, after all the battles?
He did, finally. In 1881, he was awarded the Légion d'honneur, France's highest order of merit. Though the sources suggest it wasn't easily given, it took considerable lobbying from his friend Antonin Proust, who had become Minister of Fine Arts.
A somewhat belated honor, perhaps.
A bittersweet one, certainly. His health continued to deteriorate rapidly. In early April 1883, gangrene set in his left foot, likely due to complications from the syphilis affecting his circulation and nerves. Amputation was necessary.
And he didn't survive the surgery long?
No, he died just 11 days later, on April 30th, 1883. He was only 51 years old. He's buried in Passy Cemetery in Paris.
Such a relatively short life, but an absolutely monumental impact. His legacy as the father of modernism seems secure. Why is his work considered so definitively early modern?
It really comes down to those technical innovations we've discussed. The flatness, the visible brushwork, the suppression of traditional modeling, the bold use of black outlines, all these things draw your attention to the surface of the painting, to the paint itself, rather than letting you just look through it as if it were a window onto a perfect illusion.
He makes you aware you're looking at a painting.
Precisely. He emphasizes the medium. And the art historian Beatrice Farwell summarized his key contributions brilliantly. She argued he's the father of modernism because, first, he took huge risks with the public whose approval he actually craved. Second, he made alla prima painting the standard. Third, he deliberately broke the rules of Renaissance perspective. Fourth, alongside Courbet, he rejected traditional historical and mythological subjects in favor of contemporary life.
And fifth,
he fundamentally helped establish modern urban life, the crowds, the cafes, the fleeting encounters, the alienation, the excitement as legitimate, even essential subject matter for serious high art. He took the everyday, the mundane, even the controversial, and gave it monumental artistic weight.
And that legacy is reflected in how his work is valued today.
Immensely so. The art market has certainly caught up to his importance. As a striking example, his late painting Le Printemps, Spring, from 1881, sold at auction in 2014 for over $65 million. That set a new record for his work at the time, far exceeding the previous record held by one of his self-portraits. It shows the enduring power and recognition of his vision.
Which also explains why there's still so much interest in exploring his connections and influence, like that recent major exhibition at the Met in New York focusing on his relationship with Degas. These artists weren't working in a vacuum. They were reacting to and pushing each other.
So if we try to pull it all together, Manet's central role really emerges from that unique combination.
Right.
He mastered the tools, the visual language of the old masters. He knew his Titian, his Velázquez, his Raphael, but then he applied that classical toolkit with this shocking directness and immediacy to the realities, often uncomfortable, unflattering realities of 19th century Paris.
He was this fascinating paradox, an insider by birth from a wealthy, powerful family, yet he became the ultimate painter of outsiders, of the marginal, the modern. He didn't just reject tradition, he used it, twisted it, subverted it to forge this path towards modernity, fueled by controversy and radical formal innovation.
His great champion, Émile Zola, captured this perfectly way back in 1867. He wrote of Manet's work, "We are not accustomed to seeing such simple and direct translations of reality. It is a truly charming experience to contemplate this luminous and serious painting, which interprets nature with a gentle brutality."
Gentle brutality. That phrase is so evocative, isn't it? It perfectly captures that Manet effect, the sophisticated technique, the often beautiful paint handling, delivering the sometimes harsh, sometimes awkward, but always intensely present truth about modern life. He jolted his viewers out of their comfort zones.
Exactly. He used skill to deliver a punch. A punch about what it felt like to be alive, right then, right there, in that rapidly changing world.
So if Manet, in his final suffering months, felt he could say everything he needed to say with just flowers, fruit, and clouds, yet still retain that gentle brutality, that direct, unflinching focus on the material reality of the thing itself. Maybe the challenge for you listening today is to think about what that gentle brutality might look like now. What subjects in our own complex modern lives could be depicted with that kind of simple, direct, maybe even controversial honesty? What can you say, perhaps with unexpected beauty, about the world right in front of you?